Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Gregory-Clarke. I'm the head of technology for Immersive at Digital Catapult. And it's my job to sort of oversee a raft of different programs and interventions that we run at Digital Catapult to help companies in the UK to use new digital technology and specifically immersive tech. I'm going to talk today just for a few minutes about a program that we run called Creative XR, which is a content acceleration program that we run in collaboration with Arts Council England to help boost immersive creative content making. I'll talk a bit about the way the program works, and then I'm going to use it just to talk a bit about the different formats of content that we're seeing coming through, because actually it's running this program, it's a great vantage point. You see a great little microcosm of completely different types of content coming through, and you start to spot patterns and things. So we'll talk a bit about that, which I hope will be helpful background for the panel discussion we're about to have. So if you haven't heard of us before, in a nutshell, Digital Catapult is essentially a UK government-backed accelerator and R&D lab hybrid, and it's our remit to help work with companies of all different kinds in the UK to help them to use advanced digital tech. So that includes immersive, which is of course my area, but it also includes future networks, which encompasses 5G, Internet of Things, AI and machine learning as well, and we also do some work in blockchain. And we have two big industry areas that we focus on. One is digital manufacturing, and the other is the creative industries, which is squarely where this one sits. So Creative XR is essentially a content acceleration program. That means we're working with creative practitioners in the arts and cultural space to try and help boost the creation of immersive content that uses virtual reality, augmented reality, immersive sound, haptics, everything within that bracket. And I can actually see some Creative XR alumni here around, so hi guys, welcome back. And so we were actually about to enter the second cohort. We ran the first cohort last year, and we took 20 companies onto the program to make 20 amazing projects. We do it in collaboration with the Arts Council, and that's for very good reason. Arts Council, obviously, we're very different organisations. They focus on artists and creative practitioners, whereas Digital Catapult typically has a bit more of a tech and business focus, but this whole area needs all of those expertise in it at the moment, so that's why we've collaborated to make this project. And essentially, the reason that we do it is because we see there's massive appetite amongst creatives of all different kinds to use this technology. We also see massive appetite amongst audiences. There might not be a mass audience yet, but every bit of audience testing I've ever been involved with shows great potential for this amongst consumers. And as an industry, we all agree that it will be the content, the quality and quantity of the content that's going to drive this forward in the future. And yet, at the moment, it's still very hard to fund and be funded in this space. And that's because the mass consumer audience isn't there, the business models aren't quite there yet. So Creative XR is hoping to address that in some small way. So the way it works is that we run an open call and we take on 20 companies per cohort. We're about to announce the second. And if you're on the program, the benefit to you is you get up to 20k to develop a prototype, access to a network of mentors, we run workshops, there are facilities available, and at the end they can pitch their ideas to a marketplace, a sort of showcase event. And oh, sorry, can you hear me all right? Yeah, I think I've not been holding this right. To a marketplace event, and that's to try and connect them to as many distributors, exhibitors, commissioners, all those people in this ecosystem that actually has to exist for this to really be sustainable. And then there is an opportunity for them to secure some more funding through the program if they can find some match funding from industry. And I've got a little video clip I'm going to try and play that should show some of the output of last year's cohort, just to give you an idea. Or will it? Ugh. There we
go. Imagine a place devoid of sound, complete and utter silence.
or order. That's why there are all those bad and ugly things that we hope to do away with if this plan of ours is carried out.
Step into the water. Water is a better conductor for thought.
This is where the sea thrashes at high tide, washes away the walls of time like sand. Hurry! Creatures are dying!
Aircraft. I'm going to attack. Speed control, flight engineer. 220. All guns ready, gunners. Coming up.
We shall drive them out of France, out of Flanders, out of Belgium.
Okay. Thanks. I'd like to say that was all my work. It wasn't, but it was other people's excellent work from last year. And it just, I mean, there's a massive, massive variety of things in there. And I'm going to use a few examples in just a moment, just to pick out a few of the very, very different forms that this can take in a second. Just to add, I think there were 20 great projects in that cohort. I can't talk about all of them, but 3 of them, I'm really happy to say, the Collider by Anagram, Traitor by Pilot Theatre, and Common Ground by VR City just got announced as part of the official Tribeca Film Festival lineup last week. So that is fantastic, testament to their work. And also, I will say, to their creativity on still very small budgets as well, actually. So they've done some amazing things, and we are really proud of what they've achieved. So now to talk a little bit about formats. So last year, Digital Catapult commissioned Limina Immersive to do a bit of a research project into the sort of emerging genres and formats that are coming through with immersive content. And the purpose of that was to just try and move the conversation on a bit about the way we talk about this kind of content. Because a few years ago, it was just, oh, it's a Vive experience, or it's a HoloLens experience or something. But of course, that doesn't really mean anything. And you don't talk about your favourite TV shows by the brand of television you watched it on. That is kind of irrelevant. So we were just trying to move that conversation on a little bit. And what they came up with was a set of 15 sort of emerging formats, and they gave them all a name, and they have a sort of a description of them. I'm not going to go into all of them here. I have a link. It's a report that's available on Digital Catapult website. I'll put it up in a minute. But I did want to pick out a couple of them that were ones that we saw quite a lot on Creative XR last year, just to give you a bit of an example. I thought it would be useful to touch upon here, just because if we're going to curate and if we're going to keep things, we need a way of defining them and describing them, so we can find them again, and we can work out where they belong as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So 4 examples here. So the first one, revisualizing testimony is the name they gave it. And this is a sort of emerging genre I've seen a lot over the last couple of years, particularly in the sort of documentary area. But this is the idea of creating some kind of visual experience that is bringing to life a historic event or the testimony of a real person. Sometimes it uses archive. I've seen some brilliant things that use archive of other kinds of media within the virtual experience to bring that to life. We saw a few of those examples in Creative XR, and I've seen it at film festivals throughout over the last year or so. There's a lot of that. Another type of content that we've seen, a theme that we've seen a lot, is this perspective shifting theme. So the idea of putting you in the shoes of somebody else, in a place that you could never be, and really trying to, often it has some kind of embodiment. You actually are a person, and you're actually being encouraged to experience life from a different point of view. Some pieces of content will actually fit both of those boxes, whereas some of them might be more strongly one than the other. Another example is the treasure hunt example, and this is more of a sort of a style of storytelling involving putting digital objects in the real world, encourage people to follow them, to find them, and telling a story that way. You see that a lot with sort of AR or mixed reality content. And another one, completely different, is this audio journey sort of format that I've seen a lot of, and is, again, increasingly a trend at the moment around audio-only content or sound-led experiences where sound augments your world, even without a visual element. And I mean, personally, I think actually audio-led augmented reality might be the first form of augmented reality that really hits the mainstream, because it doesn't actually involve anything very significantly different in terms of your design and your, using different devices and things like that. So that's another trend that we see a lot. So a couple of examples from the programme. So Immersive Histories by All Seeing Eye is an experience that is about the Dam Busters mission, and this will be on display at the RAF Museum very soon. I think it's just been released. And this was intended to be as accurate as possible, a narrative about the Dam Busters mission, to bring that to life. And then the second example here is Common Ground by VR City, and this is about social housing. It's very much a documentary piece about the Aylesbury estate in London. Now, they're very different pieces, but they are essentially both virtual reality experiences. They both could stand alone, but in fact they are, particularly Immersive Histories, is intended to be part of an installation, a location-based installation. I've got a little clip of the experience. I'll just show you quickly.
Hello, all cooler aircraft. I'm going to attack. Speed control, flight engineer. 220, all guns ready, gunners. Coming up, spam. Spotlight on. 230, down. 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 Left. Little more left. 16, steady. 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 Coming up. 220, one gone.
Okay, so this, as you can see, this is an example of that sort of testimonial content or revisualizing testimony content I was talking about earlier. But what I wanted to point out here is we're not just talking about an experience that's made for a particular type of headset with a particular type of software. It was also intended to be experienced with a physical installation as well. So it's not just about the technology, but it's about the environment in which it was intended to be consumed as well that we've got to think about when we're thinking about keeping it. In this case, they did an interesting thing. They created a really faithful replica of part of the inside of a Lancaster. They made it out of wood, but they created the design so that it could be 3D printed, so that if any other museum somewhere else in the rest of the world wanted to put it on, they could just send them the design and they can get it 3D printed themselves rather than having to ship stuff around the world. That's also very interesting from an archiving point of view. If you want to keep that element of the experience as well, how can we store that digitally in a completely different way? My next example, I've got a couple of examples here that were virtual reality experiences that also had a live performance element as well. So this is another kind of format we've seen quite a lot of. And actually, if I'm honest, some of the best things I've seen in the last year or two have been of this form. I think maybe it's a personal taste thing, but I absolutely love that kind of thing. And I think I've seen some really great stuff. Traitor by Pilot Theatre. This one, it's sort of about espionage. It's a game-like experience aimed at young people. But the way it works is it has one person in a headset, one person not in a headset, with a control panel, and they can interact with each other. And it also has a live actor in the mix as well. So 2 people at a time with a live actor. And I know from trying to, when they sent us a build of this near the end of the process, myself and 2 of my colleagues tried to act it out because we were trying to review it. And it was really, really hard to do that. Even though we had a script, we had instructions of how it should work, I thought actually how are we going to keep this? How is anybody else going to see this? How could this travel, if you like? It's really difficult to do. Fatherland, this is another great example. This best one way for me to show you this is, again, a little video clip.
Dad, do you want a beer? I'm having a beer. Do you want a beer? Dad just loved a good story. when we were kids, he used to make them up for us all the time. It felt like he was inventing them right there on the spot. I'm up here because of how much I loved those stories.
So Fatherland is a sort of hybrid VR theatre piece, and it's sort of loosely based on the performer Ben, his experiences with his father and dementia. But this is, again, completely different. So in this case, you have an audience member who actually swaps in and out. But, they have a VR headset on. The actor on stage has trackers on them. They are motion captured in real time, and he then embodies different characters within that experience. On top of that, you also then have a live theatre audience all the way around as well, who are sort of interacting. There's some audience participation as well. So incredibly complex, but a really interesting experiment in how to sort of extend these experiences to a broader audience and let many people experience them at the same time. But again, you know, how do we keep this? How do we keep that whole production, that entire experience, and let it travel? It's definitely hard to do. Our next few examples just are augmented reality experiences. So we had XR Museum by NSC Creative. This was a piece that was intended to be a sort of companion to an exhibit in the National Space Centre. And then we had another one, Whitechapel Tales AR by 1888, and that was a sort of Jack the Ripper tour AR experience. So that was intended to be experienced in a very specific place in London. So, you know, again, this brings up really interesting questions. If you have AR experiences, where are they meant to be experienced? And what happens if we don't have control over those places? What if a place that once existed is bulldozed, or that experience, you know, that exhibit no longer exists? How do we keep that element of it as well? And does the experience make sense if it doesn't have that real world counterpart to it? And then the last example I have is just an immersive audio experience. As I said, I think this is a big trend at the moment. This one is a piece called Open Space by Room Size, which has a sort of virtual orchestra. I will just show you quickly. Nope. Some of them are automatic and some of them are not. I'm not sure what's happening to the sound, so I'm going to skip that, but you get the idea. It's essentially a virtual orchestra that was laid out, and the users had headphones on that had trackers, and as you wander around, you experience different parts of the sort of sound story that in the place where they would have been generated from. Again, in that case, if you were going to keep something like that, you know, you probably need some kind of plan of, you know, physically in space, where would that orchestra have been, and being able to calibrate that into the real world as well. So there's things to think about. So in summary, this was meant to sort of get us to think about the fact that we need to account for a huge variation in both the creative formats, the sort of genres that are coming through, and understanding what those genres are. The technical distribution method, of course, you know, the physical devices and the software that you need to maintain and keep in order to show it, but also the intended experience and viewing environment as well, and how can we keep a record of that? How could we recreate it? How could we make sure that somebody in the future would see something the way it was intended when these things are so complicated and so varied? That's it. Thank you very much.